Raya actually sort of laid a very fertile ground for us. She lit the fuse. A year ago when Raya's list was out, I don't think feminists, the women who sort of rejected that list, I think it was a state of shock. I'm not making excuses for them. There's no excuse for what happened, but it's not like we're doing any greater due process than Raya did. But I think they didn't quite know how to react to that list. Hey, these are friends of mine. Do I reject them? Do I not reject them?
A year ago, Raya Sarkar's list of predatory men in academia abusing their power to sexually harass women sparked the first, although limited, public debate on harassment. It would take months for Me Too to take the shape of a movement in India. 2018 saw women call out powerful men, from union ministers to veteran editors, film industry stalwarts, stand-up comedians, and advertising industry biggies, underscoring how pervasive sexual harassment in the workplace is.
A year later, I know all these women have rejected the men on those. At least most of the women have rejected the men on that list, saying, no, I have to draw a line here. And a year of constant coverage across the West and how women have reacted has sort of forced them to take a stand. Either we stand by women or we stand by the ones who've been accused. So I think a year later, the time was right. I have constantly been speaking. You know how it is with the whisper networks, right? We warn our colleagues, we warn our friends to stay away from certain kinds of people. So I have been quite vocal about it, but this time around I decided to name names. So that was the different thing that I did this time around. One of the first markers that this was becoming bigger than just my relating my experience on Twitter was the fact that there were women DMing me. I think within 2 days I had like 50 DMs from women wanting to talk about their experiences. So at that point I had a hint of how big this was going to be, but definitely not seeing myself as a rallying point.
Sandhya and a small group of women who had posted personal narratives of sexual harassment in the workplace evolved to become facilitators for other women to share their stories. In an ecosystem where women talking of harassment are routinely disbelieved, this group painstakingly engaged with questions and criticism.
The first 2-3 accounts that I posted, I was just horrified that this was still happening 10 years after it had happened to me, 10, 12 years after it had happened to me. I assumed with all the, and completely wrong assumption on my part, but I assumed with all the talking that's been going on about safe spaces for women and conduct by men, I thought things would have been better. And we don't live in the same place that we lived 15 years ago. And I thought men in power would have a better idea of their own situation. So when women were telling me, I was just horrified and I posted their accounts straight up. And I think it was a series of questions in the first 10 accounts or so that people asked me saying, but how do you know this is true? And I'm like, oh yeah, my default position was to believe, which is not a great quality in a journalist, but I think at that point I was acting as a woman who had lost out on opportunities because of an unsafe working space instead of talking as a journalist. So after the first 2-3 times when I didn't sort of go back and verify, and I knew I knew these women, right? So I didn't feel the need to go back and verify, and I know there was no way they were going to talk. They were going to tell lies. Once the questions started to come in, and I'm like, okay, we need to figure out how to do this. So then I think with each iteration of a certain question, a certain method involved. So how do you know this is true? Right? So then you do a little background checks, especially when you had when I had accounts from women I didn't know. So then I had to go back and say, hey, can you send me an email address, your phone number, primary email address, your phone number, and an email that says, if I get sued for defamation, you'll come to court and back your story up. That was a great thing because not one woman said, no, I will not do this. Every woman said yes happily. They sent me their numbers, they sent me their primary email addresses. So if you get an email address and if you get a phone number, there's ways of finding out. I even asked the people where they work. These were strangers. So they were skittish about telling me where they work, but almost all of them told me where they work. And I did my own background research in terms of, do these people work where they say they work? And a lot of them turned up on LinkedIn or turned up on Facebook, and it was easy to find them. So there was a sense of legitimacy to that. Second, I would ask if I knew, so ad agencies, newspapers, TV, I would know people who worked in that space in that time. So I checked with people who these people might have worked with and say, hey, could this have happened? Not to disbelieve the women, but just to do my little process. So I haven't got one response that said, hey, I don't know if this could have happened or not. Almost all of them have been saying, yeah, this is perfectly possible. The other level of check was also when the woman felt comfortable enough without feeling like I was disbelieving. I asked her, hey, can someone else corroborate this account? It needn't have been that someone saw it. It could just be that someone, you told someone, like I did. Like I told a friend, like within 10 minutes of the incident that happened with me, I called a friend and said, dude, this is what happened. What do we do about this? So I realized that's a reaction a lot of women have. Some women have a reaction of not, especially if the harassment borders an assault, but a lot of women tend to tell their colleagues, tell their friends, tell their boyfriends, parents, whatever. So I asked, is there anyone who you can tell me, who you can let me talk to? They was like, yeah, I've spoken to these people. I didn't reach out to those people and say, hey, did this happen? Some of them volunteered, saying, hey, you asked my friend if I would be able to corroborate it. Yes, it happened to me. This is what we were doing when this happened, all of that. So these were the processes that evolved as far as verification and veracity of an account was concerned.
Some of the movement's most vocal critics were senior women journalists like Tavleen Singh and Seema Mustafa, willing apologists, some would argue, for sexual predators. Follow due process, some advised, knowing fully well that most women have had no access to systemic redress. That women who have in the past petitioned their workplaces have had a heavy price to pay.
It was infuriating. More than infuriating, it was, I think, absolutely disappointing. It's really hard for me to imagine someone with years of experience, career-wise as well as life-wise, for someone like Tavleen Singh to say what she did. And the way I got around it was just to tell myself that this is the attitude that's propagated the entitlement that men seem to carry within themselves in order to, harass women sexually. It's focus on the work, focus on the other things, focus on getting ahead. These things happen, take it in your stride. Women like Tavleen Singh, a host of other women, I don't want to get into the names right now because there were some who just spoke to me directly and didn't make public statements. And these are powerful women. These are women who've been in the industry for many, many years. They've had to fight battles that we don't have to fight, which is I want a front page byline, or I want to do politics. These are the battles that were bigger at that point. And it would be wrong to say that those battles are smaller than this. When women didn't have a space, didn't have a place in newsrooms or in edit meets, these women made it possible. And we as journalists stand on their shoulders. And I'm never going to take away credit from that. But because they haven't fought the battles we fought doesn't mean it's not a battle to be fought. Now we do cover politics. We do get front page bylines. And it's not a fight to be in the newsroom anymore, in an edit meet, or to be an editor. When those fights are taken care of, and I'm as thankful as we are, we fight new battles. And these are the battles that we fight. The only way I could wrap my head around that was maybe they didn't pay attention to how it was corroding them, how it was getting them down. Mostly, I found the dissonance between people understanding that, and this is where I think the discourse is finally getting to now, people understanding that what we're doing on social media and what we're doing while we call out harassers on social media has nothing to do with getting justice from due process or the law. If you ask these 200, 300 women who have DM'd me, a very small percentage wants justice from due process. Now, is that because of lack of faith in due process? Is it because they realize how difficult it is to do it and really they don't have the time or the energy or the money sometimes? Or is it because they don't want that person in prison or don't want him to pay a fine or any of that thing? All they want is to be apologized to. And this was what came out for me hugely, right? The fact that justice should, and I don't like saying should too much, but justice should really depend on what the survivor, the victim, or the complainant deems as justice. Within like reasonable limitations. I mean, if she says off with your head, that's a different thing entirely. But if all she wants is an apology, then that's her choice. If all she wants is a written apology, that's also her choice. If she wants a public one, that's her choice. If she wants to go to the police, that's her choice. For a lot of us, I think justice just meant that we were able to talk about this and publicly point to the person who had made our lives really difficult. For me to realize that men were just completely unwilling to look at circumstances, at truth, at the sincerity of a situation, and demand from women who called men out proof, legal proof. And I cannot imagine that so many men exist without empathy, or so many men exist hating and disliking women. It's hard for me to imagine. So where is this coming from? Are you so afraid of something that you have done yourself that you're asking for proof and you will not look at this in an empathetic light? Or are you so terrified that your wives, your daughters, your sisters have gone through this, so you don't want to look at it, so you're saying, no, give me proof? Or are you just a completely terrible person? So for me, that is what emerged. The fact that people were willing to, men especially, were willing to let go of their empathy in the face of sounding, where is the proof? And if you really were harassed, why don't you go to the police?
Singer Chinmay has now been removed from the Tamil dubbing union, and it effectively means here that she cannot dub for Tamil films anymore.
A day after he dismissed allegations of sexual harassment leveled against him by more than 10 journalists, Minister of State for External Affairs MJ Akbar took the legal route.
Priya is one of the best people that I've met in terms of how she deals with a certain sort of equanimity that I want to emulate. And to see Akbar come at her with that horrible suit, and to hear of the several women who are now being isolated, to hear idiot men turn around and say, oh, now men won't employ women. It really breaks my heart. It makes me extremely sad. Where do we go from here for the women who have faced a terrible price and are paying, a consequence that they knew was coming their way, but it has actually happened. I mean, men have brazened it out and put women in that position. So I feel a great sense of helplessness, but also when I think of my helplessness, I also see simultaneously a certain resolve rise in me saying, no, this cannot happen. We will not let it happen. So if you ask me specifically what we can do about this, I don't know. But do we have the will? And is there a path? Yes, there is. It's unclear, but there is a path forward. One of the first criticisms that we handled and tried to reflect upon further was the lack of diversity in this movement. It wasn't designed, so first of all, this movement wasn't designed to be anything. Second, it wasn't intentional, and it sounds terrible, but it's not a way of leaving DBA women out. Yes, we should have thought about it as soon as we talked about our experiences. The thing is, it started with a personal narrative. So when you're talking from a personal narrative, it's hard to say, hey, let me involve these people. But when it started to become a bigger thing, we started to understand that the voices that are coming out are limited. So it's not to say that because there was no narrative attached to Raya's list, that women shouldn't be believed. But you're talking to, if you've seen the kind of backlash that's come in the last 2 months, even when women are witnessing their own stories and telling them the way it happened, people are saying, oh, give us proof. I think this time around, just the presence of narratives, just the presence of women giving detailed accounts of what's happened, screenshots, all of that has just sort of gone towards taking this a little more seriously. It is not because I am upper caste, but I do accept that I have the privilege of caste, I have the privilege of a class location, I have the privilege of being followed on Twitter and having a presence on Twitter. These are all great privileges that I'm deeply, deeply aware of. And it has made that possible. Now it's on us, it's on Savarna women to use that privilege in a way that does better good, bigger good than just for the clique that we are. It has got to work that way. We either give up that privilege and whatever, you can't give up privilege that you have. I mean, I can't go out of my social location. I can't go to my class location. I cannot give up that privilege without it meaning nothing. It would be a meaningless statement. But to use that privilege to further the cause of intersectionality in terms of justice for women, safe environments for women, whatever, whether that's in an office or whether that's in a factory, whether that's in domestic workers, the only thing to do is use that privilege to see that it doesn't benefit only you. And that's mostly the reflection, that's mostly what I've learned. And there's so much more to learn in terms of how to do this without pushing out the people who actually need us to speak for them.
Love your morning fix? Help support our journalism. Subscribe to Scroll Plus using the link in the description.